Saturated fat is one of the most confusing topics in the health and fitness world. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. But if you guys would, please click like on my video down below. If you are not subscribed or following, please do so and drop me a comment down under there. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, on to the topic of saturated fat. This is one of these that, because of people on both extremes, because of old evidence, old data, old discussions, has created an enormous fight to where we have people on one extreme who completely demonize it, and then we have people who believe it is the healthiest thing in the world, and the reality is both are wrong. When you really look at the data, right, we step back and say, what does the accumulated scientific evidence around the world show? It actually shows it's a lot more complicated and nuanced than either of them would have you believe. In fact, the totality of your diet, the source and type of the saturated fat are all factors. You know, keeping in mind it was largely heavily demonized due to the old Ansel Keys studies in I believe the 1970s. Was it the 60s or 70s? I think it was the 70s. But keep in mind that was very incomplete data. We didn't have a lot of the analysis we have today, the equipment we have today, the metabolic wards and things that we have today. So it's a very outdated topic. But because it was outdated and there's been updated data discussing this in a lot more detail, you have people on this other far extreme who are like, aha, it was a government conspiracy. It's the best thing for you. It's healthy. And this is an enormous, giant growing movement. And they are actually flat wrong based on the data. Okay. What seems to matter the most is kind of the source of the saturated fat, the context of what the food is you're eating it in, and then the context of the rest of your diet and your genetics. These are all factors. Lo and behold, it's not that simple. So when I give you that answer, that is what the science says. That it's really complicated based upon a host of a bunch of factors. All right, a perfect example, dairy fat, right? Dairy fat. All right, in whole milk, when it has been studied, when it is studied in the lab, and in the metabolic ward, they find that whole milk is actually neutral on your cardiac health and cardiac health markers. It means it's not good, nor is it bad. Okay, it doesn't positively improve your lipid and health markers and inflammation necessarily. In some cases, it can lower it a hair sometimes, but it also doesn't affect it negatively. It is pretty much a neutral food. Okay, I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Now, that being said, we know for athletes and lifters, dairy is a superfood. It's phenomenal. I promote it. But it's also not going to dramatically improve your health. It doesn't have a lot of antioxidants. It's not massively anti-inflammatory. It's just kind of neutral. On the other hand, when butter has been taken out and extracted and compared side by side, it negatively affects health markers. When butter is just consumed, which is again a refined food that's been stripped of all the cardioprotective benefits that's in milk, all the calcium, magnesium, potassium, vitamin B12, all that stuff is gone. It's all taken out. It's taken out. It raises LDL, raises inflammatory markers pretty consistently in the lab, even when the same quantities are consumed. So in both cases, saturated fat has been consumed from the same original source. The outcome is different. Context matters. Context matters. Whereas another anytime you take a saturated fat and you strip it away from the food, you go with coconut oil, butter, palm oil, all this stuff, it almost always has a negative effect on health markers. It's almost as if refined foods are not particularly great for us. Pretty consistent, irrespective of the source. You know, saying people argue, well, butter's not refined, but it totally is. And I just told you how it is. And the data confirms it. You look at it in the lab, it's junk food. You can not believe that all you want, but that's what the data shows. And the same experts are saying milk is fine. Let us be clear. All right, same thing. We come over with something like red meat. Data shows that refined red meats are pretty dang bad. Right? They're pretty dang bad. Sausage, bacon, all this stuff, right? Salami, horrible effect on your health. Beef, like just whole beef, not so much. kind of see where we're going. So it's like when beef is just studied by itself, largely healthy, minor negative effect on LDL when consumed in moderation. And moderation doesn't mean, or let's have 3 pounds of steak a day. No, I mean eating a lean steak every day, LDL cholesterol changes a tiny amount in a bad direction. But is that really a major concern? No, not really. So again, let's come over, what do the experts say? Yeah, LDL is the driver of atherosclerosis. That's not even debated anymore. Like all the leading experts who study are like, yeah, it's very clear, the evidence supporting that it is. It's a very clear-cut thing at this point. We're sure of this based upon hundreds of studies, looking at clinical trials, looking at case studies, absolutely. But it's when it reaches a certain threshold. But here's the thing when it comes to something like steak, context of your diet matters. Your genetics matter. All these things affect it. They matter. And what the data shows is that if your lifestyle is generally healthy, you're eating all your other vegetables, your cardioprotective foods, having a decent amount of lean steak every day doesn't impact your LDL enough that it would be a concern if you're a healthy person. So again, people say, well, that's bias. No, it's not bias science. That is what the data is showing. Yeah, you can get away with a bit of steak. A bit of lean red meat every day is not problematic in the context of a healthy lifestyle. Perfectly fine. Yes, it may raise your LDL a couple of points, but if your overall lifestyle keeps it in a healthy range, it's not a concern. It's when the rest of your diet is out of balance. So you see where we're going with all this? Cardioprotective foods. Eating your broccoli, and that's the perfect example. Look how bad a lot of the carnivore or really hardcore people's diets, like their LDL will be sky high, fasting glucose high, but other health markers are in check, but those are still bad, and yes, they still cause atherosclerosis. But when the red meat is moderated a little more, still can be consumed in significant amounts, and people eat a lot of vitamin K2 rich foods, broccoli, spinach, overall diet rich in antioxidants, they're physically active. Guess what? The blood work still looks okay eating beef every day in moderation. Looks perfectly fine. It's all about context, your lifestyle, and the totality of your diet. This is what the data shows. It's saturated fat itself, not necessarily inherently bad. In some cases it can be, in the context of the balance of your diet or the source of it being more of a junk food. But overall, it can be fairly neutral. It can be neutral. Now, that being said, it's also not a great health food where people are like, oh, we see all the experts are now showing it's the greatest thing. No, they're just showing that it's generally neutral. It's not a negative if your overall lifestyle is positive and your diet's balanced. Yeah, you can absolutely eat beef every day and still be perfectly fine and perfectly healthy. That's what it shows. But that's not a glaring endorsement of, oh, it's that great health food and we should eat 50 grams of saturated fat a day and it doesn't matter. And LDL, well, no, that's not true. But it's also not the other extreme of, oh, it's the most horrible thing you could eat. Well, no, the reality is refined sugars, heavily processed red meats, all that stuff. That's the worst stuff you could be consuming. Alcohol, right? Those are the worst things you can be consuming. Saturated fat in moderation, way down the list. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative. I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.